one of the things that was unfortunate when The Last of Us Part 2 was released was after you're done beating the story, there's really not much else to do outside of the campaign, which was really unfortunate to me because I feel that a lot of the fans of The Last of Us Part 2 may very well, after beating the campaign, move on to other games. Whereas if they would have launched with factions or with other multiplayer modes, it would have really kept a lot of this community together, which I do believe when it does come out, at some point or another, that being multiplayer modes in The Last of Us Part 2, I think a lot of people will come back to try them out. I just feel that there's a real sense of that this game could have really capitalized on those huge numbers it was doing as far as sales and things of that nature if it already had multiplayer built in. But that's another conversation for another day. I want to talk, guys, in this segment of the show about multiplayer modes in The Last of Us Part 2 and what we could expect from factions making a return. And with that, what new multiplayer modes should be introduced in The Last of Us Part 2. So let's talk about it. In order to look forward, guys, sometimes we have to look at the past. In The Last of Us Part 1, the online multiplayer allows up to 8 players to engage in competitive gameplay in recreations of multiple single-player settings. The game features 3 multiplayer game types that Supply Raid and Survivors are both team death matches, with the latter excluding the ability to respawn. Interrogation features teams investigating the location of the enemy team's lockbox, and the first to capture said lockbox wins. In every mode, players select a faction: Hunters, which is a group of hostile survivors, or Fireflies, a revolutionary militia group, and keep their clan alive by collecting supplies during matches. Each match is equal to 1 day by surviving 12 weeks. Players have completed a journey that can reselect their faction. Killing enemies, reviving allies, and crafting items earn the player parts that can be converted to supplies. Supplies can also be scavenged from enemies' bodies. Players are able to carry more equipment by earning points as their clan supplies grow. Players can connect the game to their Facebook account, which alters clan members' names and faces to match the player's Facebook friends. Players have the ability to customize their characters with hats, helmets, masks, and emblems. The multiplayer servers for the PlayStation 3 version of the game were shut down on September 3rd, 2019. So that's one thing, guys, that's a real unfortunate thing, was the shutdown. I feel that I'm hoping with The Last of Us Part 2, we won't see them shut down the servers. I mean, it's nice to have those servers continue to stay up. I mean, you look at like Call of Duty, the servers for all of those games have been up for, I mean, pretty much all the way back to COD 4. So a long time. And so I'd like to see them keep these multiplayers up so you can go back and play them. But nonetheless, guys, what other multiplayer modes could we see? One of the big ones to me that I would love to see, guys, this is more of a PvE where you play with your friends from a co-op perspective, but you play with your friends and you go up against waves and waves of enemies. Similar to what Gears of War does in Horde mode, I think what it would be really cool is being able to strategize around how you beat each wave of enemies, whether you're talking clickers and a number of other different enemies out there. It would be really cool to see waves upon waves of enemies that you go up against and the strategy on how you're going to defeat certain waves of enemies in more of a PvE kind of setting. I think that would be really awesome. The other one to me that would be really interesting is if we had a game mode, which would be PvP, where one side you play as some of those said enemies like the clickers or something, versus that of, let's say, one of the factions like the Fireflies, right? And you are kind of going up against the enemies that you're going up against, especially like in the campaign, and you're kind of going back and forth. So it's kind of like a role reversal, and I think that that could really present some interesting elements to The Last of Us Part 2, even if we're talking just factions, or if we're talking about even extending it beyond just factions where it's like PvE settings. I think that's a huge one to me, though, guys, is having ways that you're not just playing multiplayer, because not everybody loves playing PvP, but lots of players like to play with their friends and be able to go up against waves and waves of enemies, or whatever it might be, where you're going up against like a PvE elements. The same can be said with multiplayer, though. Lots of people love playing PvP at the same time. Having more ways than one to connect with the franchise is the best way, in my personal opinion. Now, Deathmatch, certainly, guys, having more different types of team deathmatch, I think would be really smart for The Last of Us Part 2 when we're talking on, really building upon the community and building this fan base as a whole. I think having more forms of team deathmatch, because it's more simplistic in the PvP and what you have to do. You're going up against the other enemy. I would even love to see some search and destroy, because one thing to me is, when we look at The Last of Us, this is one of those, there's not a lot of margin for error when you play the campaign and you're going up against, a lot of these enemies and such. And some of those engagements can be absolutely unnerving and intense, unlike anything we've ever played. So what I would love to see is like search and destroy, where you get 1 life per round and you're trying to like strategize on whatever it is, getting a lockbox or whatever it is, like having a bomb at within the middle of the map, and one team's trying to defuse, the other team's trying to plant, something like that, and it's this continuous intense environment, which is what The Last of Us Part 2 has done such a good job of. So I think there's a ton of new modes that they could add to Factions. We're going to have to wait and see, guys. We don't know. We know Factions is coming back. What that's going to look like, though, we aren't sure at this point in time. We're assuming it's going to be relatively similar, but there should be some differences to The Last of Us Part 1. But what I will say is that having some PvE elements and having an extended lineup of game modes could really do good for The Last of Us Part 2. But let me know, guys, in the comment section down below, what multiplayer modes would you want added? Would you want to come back from The Last of Us Part 1? Let me know, and let's have a real conversation about it.